The oaken oars clip against the brine swell. The storm clouds, spirits of the heavens, gather above. Against whipping wind and scouring swell, brine-lashed skin and cold-stabbed skin, the traveller goes. Across the jade peaks of water, towards a land known in myth to all but the most intrepid, the land of Albion. The white island beckons, a temptress to the brave, her fertile fields and pregnant rivers hidden behind the fortress walls of the main. Scaling these walls is no mean feat, but with teeth gritted like rocks upon one another, face ugly and contorted like worn tar-tempered rope, the traveller overcomes the aquatic enemy. He finds himself now in calmer waters, his skin-clad craft sliding gently between the brackish waters of a salt marsh, the spirits of the other world peering out from their reed residence. Guided by the unseen hands of the sea gods, he is swept into a harbour, a sheltered cove where men have made a refuge among the waves. Here, his boat is pulled ashore, and men of the Durotriges welcome him to their lands. They are lands of hill forts, where chariots race across the rolling plains, chasing the setting sun. They are lands with rich soils and rivers so numerous that the fish must build cities within them, such are their number. Forests abound with fearsome boar, ochre-skinned deer, and birds aplenty. This is Albion, gateway to the ends of the earth. Winter begins with a proposal. Bydagnos' sister, Cantisena, had a courtship with a young man known as Eurychus. It has blossomed into true love, and now they ask for the right to marry. The Tigurnos has his concerns, since the man has yet to prove himself ready for the command of anything, let alone his sister's heart. But Bydagnos is soft for his sister's wishes, and reluctantly assents to the arrangement. The melting of the snows comes with new developments. The Tigurnos has become a renowned singer and earned a reputation for being a highly talented bard. Somewhat of a narcissist, he sings promising tales of how men will achieve greatness and glorious victories under his leadership. And this persuades many young warriors of the Ordoices to join with his warband as they march out for dark summer. The battle spirit of the rebellious Ordoices, who follow the cousin of their late chieftain, is utterly pitiful to behold. The enemy cavalry shatter instantly upon contact with our own riders, as they have no true desire to resist beyond the now broken fetters of kinship and loyalty. Their sense of duty is not enough for any of these lesser tribesmen to gather their courage, as the enemy battle line utterly crumbles before the faintest show of force from the vicious Pritanoi. Too late, I realize that I've fallen for a dastardly ruse. What Bydagnos mistook for cowardice was, in fact, a luring bait, as, having put my cavalry out of mind whilst they chased down the skirmishers, I find that the horsemen have been caught by the mounted Tegeslogos of the enemy chieftain, who has slaughtered nearly half of our riders. Fortunately, the enemy's decision not to commit their elite unit to assisting in the melee combat has resulted in the hostile tribe breaking into a mass rout, with the Pritanoi infantry running them down like hounds chasing rabbits. The enemy chieftain returns to the fray, clearly looking to avenge the hopelessness of the situation by inflicting severe casualties on my younger warriors. He makes to perform a vicious charge against my infantry, but I'm quick on my reflexes and issue a halt order. The spearmen brace, and the charge bonus of the enemy cavalry is turned against them. The Pritanoi horsemen move to outflank the enemy chieftain, who remains bogged down by the spearmen, and they deliver a crushing blow to their opponents, eager to get revenge for the loss of their brothers earlier. What was once two spear walls of opposing tribes has now devolved into a chaotic, senseless mess. Some Pritanoi accidentally end up in combat with each other, and Bydagnos comes to realize that some form of uniform is needed to make sure that his people can identify themselves in the thrashing heart of violence. Victory draws near, and the stench of fear is in the air. "Look at how they run from us!" Bydagnos cries, as his warriors overwhelm the last of the Ordoices and disarm them, weaponless men fit for slavery. There are few now in the lands of Albion who seem able to resist the unstoppable Pritanoi. With the last rebellious tribe opposing the Confederation destroyed, Bydagnos' authority over southern Albion is now almost entirely unchallenged. Some disgruntled nobility among the Dumnonioi murmur discontent against their subjugation, but none dare raise their voice in the presence of the Tigurnos or his family. Our economy is finally on the mend, as enough tribes now pay tribute to sustain the expense of outfitting the warrior host. After consulting with his druidic advisor, Bydagnos is told that the warrior spirits of their ancestors demand that the sacred isle of Innis Mon be brought under the control of their people. Bydagnos sends a scout towards Wales to investigate. I'm very glad I did so, because they are ambushed by Dumnonian traitors conspiring to destroy the Pritanoi on their way west. Bydagnos immediately sets out to punish these fools. The Dumnonians confront the Pritanoi at the River Severn, at the only fording point for leagues in either direction. Bydagnos must seize this crossing point from the enemy, or be forced to retire back to Penacrugon until after the winter, halting his invasion of Wales. Bydagnos is not a man who ever backs down from a fight, however, especially not from cowardly traitors. A band of slingers is sent forward to wade into the river, pelting the enemy warband with sharp stones. Their impact is negligible, since their numbers are few. Bydagnos soon grows impatient and decides that sheer ferocity and unbridled aggression will conquer this flimsy, fragile tribe who still have the delusion of calling themselves warriors. He orders an advance. Bizarrely, The enemy cavalry surges out into the water to challenge the Britannic warriors approaching the crossing. At first, this seems like madness, since the water slows the horses down. But then I realize their gambit. The horses pin our forces in place like a shield of meat, whilst the enemy infantry rain javelins down on us. Bydagnos sees the peril of this situation, and it wounds him in his heart that he has knowingly committed so many of his warriors to their needless deaths. But to turn around and withdraw now would result in a massacre. He has no choice. He pushes forward with his veterans, wading to the front of the melee to deliver death to the Dumnonii. It is now a shoving match, with no grace or tactical wisdom, just brute force and desperation. The vicious fighting lasts for the better part of an hour, with many deaths on both sides. But the superior numbers of the Pritanoi finally shatter the Dumnonian resistance, and Bydagnos captures the far side of the River Severn. As it turned out, the results weren't as bad as Bydagnos had feared. Many of the injured were able to recover from their wounds. The path into Wales was clear, and Bydagnos occupied the abandoned Dumnonian camp. Come the autumn, our emissary finally arrived at the hearth of the Arvernoi, a powerful tribe of their Gallic cousins on the mainland. The chieftain of the Arvernoi was an aging man, and his roundhouse spoke to the truth of this. Dressed in tartan fineries, with a golden torque upon his greying head, the old warrior stared down at the Briton kneeling before him, his eyes squinted with suspicion. "You speak much of greatness in your master, boy. But I know this truth well. It is the man who boasts of his achievements that is the least deserving of your notice." The young Briton frowned, for he knew that the king spoke true. It was important that he secure the rights of trade with these people, but he also must not disgrace his Tigernus before this man, who would think the Pritanoi the lesser of his people. "Honoured king, if our leader, Bydagnos, was a braggart, it would be he stood before you speaking of his achievements, rather than I, his faithful servant. Let my loyalty speak to his strength, if nothing else might persuade you." "Ha! You are not the first to come before my court. Speaking of some hero beyond the waves who would seek to unite Albion." "My master does not come to beseech you, seeking your aid. Far from it. He merely offers you the chance to profit from his achievements." "Most entertaining." "Very well. I shall permit this amusing little conceit. You will have your barter, and we shall pay fine gold in return for your tin. But know this. Should you ever think to stand before me and speak as if yours was the voice of one king to another, to presume your petty chieftain to be my equal, there shall be dire consequences." Our emissary secures trade with the Arvernoi, despite their reluctance, and travels south in search of the Latins. Meanwhile, Bydagnos surrounds the settlement in southern Wales. Considering that the enemy have stockpiled minimal supplies, he decides to wait for them to come to him. The winter is uneventful, as Bydagnos maintains his siege on the Silurians. The opposing tribe sallies out of the village at the end of the winter, attacking the besiegers head-on. I discover that my decision-making was somewhat flawed. Bydagnos is not nearly as skilled on the defensive as he is when leading an attack, much to my chagrin, as I contemplate whether or not to withdraw from this unfavourable situation. But I'm confident we can still overcome the enemy, and we meet their advance. Scrambling into a formation, the Pritanoi deploy themselves in a conjoined line of spears and swords to meet the enemy advance. Hostile cavalry come crashing into the braced spears of our leftmost flank, an unfortunate mistake on their part. The Pritanoi respond by moving forward, leaving a gap in their line in order to wrap around the enemy cavalry like a constricting snake, strangling them and cutting off their escape. Meanwhile, the bulk of the Silurian infantry smashes into our right flank, and bloody mayhem soon follows. It's uncertain which side is winning the fight at first, as casualties begin to rack up on both sides of the melee. As enemy infantry strives to reclaim control of the left flank, Bydagnos orders a charge from the middle to intercept and overwhelm the approaching foeman. Battle is joined in full, and the butcher's work begins. Britannic riders and their chariots make short work of the enemy's encirclement attempt, putting their spearmen to rout. Meanwhile, on the other flank, a unit of Ambak Tower perform a maneuver to get into the back line of the opposing spear wall. They're successful, since there was no hostile reserve on that flank to contest them. Even as the rest of their tribe collapses into panic, the enemy chieftain fights boldly, resisting the Pritanoi until the last man falls. As the lands of Siluria fall into the grasp of the Pritanoi, a ripple of unease begins to spread across Albion. A sense of foreboding, a feeling that what was happening was not just the mad undertakings of some glory-hound warlord, but the transformation of the land, a deep-rooted change. Perhaps the work of the gods in forging the people of Albion into something new. Thank you for watching this episode of At World's End, and I'll see you next time.